The world of ballet, known for its beauty and rigorous training, is a discipline deeply rooted in tradition and history. In 2001, a young black ballerina from California arrived in New York City to see if she could fit into that uncompromising culture. Since then, Misty Copeland has changed the face of ballet and impacted the world in ways she never imagined. The first black female principal dancer with the world-famous American Ballet Theater, Copeland is now 38 years old and a global icon. She was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people, has written a best-selling memoir, performed on tour with Prince, and has been honored with a Barbie doll in her likeness. With a new children's book recently hitting the market and her voice intensified around the cause of social justice, I sat down with Copeland to discuss her pioneering journey on this special edition of One to One. How did you do this in a pandemic? Misty, you are an athlete, an artist, an activist. Do you think most ballet dancers are underappreciated as athletes?
Oh, absolutely. I think that all the hard work is hidden behind the curtain. And what we present to the world is beautiful, effortless, not something that people need to have any tension or fear when they're watching. And so therefore, because we work so hard to make it look that way, people assume it is easy. That's something I'm very conscious of. And when I signed on with my endorsement deal with Under Armour, I think it was the first time that, they really shined a light on the physicality. And so to have my first commercial with them, I Will What I Want, where you see my body and you see my muscles working, you see me jumping and you see the effort that goes into it. I feel like that's kind of where we're at in the world, where people want to see the journey and they want to connect and they want to relate and they want you to be human. My whole point of doing these things is to expand the audience and to be able to bring it to more people. I think one of the biggest changes I saw were so many American men that would come to my book signings and come to my performances with a different appreciation, whereas they didn't have really that interest or again feel that connection to invest in something that seems so removed from their lives or what their interests may be.
Plus, I always tell people like LeBron or, Lamar Jackson or Tom Brady, they don't have to smile when they're doing it.
Exactly. That's one of the things that sets us apart from so many different sports or art is that there's so many elements to it. We are investing in telling a story through movement in a silent art form. So much of the expression and the small nuances of our face and our upper body and our arms and our hands and the articulation of our feet, the investment is endless in getting it to look the way it does. But again, to be able to tell a story through movement that's very nuanced and detailed and getting people to understand it.
Is it, and maybe you're proof of this, I always say about sports, I love it because it's the great meritocracy. It doesn't matter where your father went to college or how much money your mother has. Either you hit the jumper, you sink the putt. I mean, does ballet reward the best?
I think in general, yes. Either you can accomplish what you need to do on stage or you can't. But of course, there are other things that hold people back. I mean, clearly race is one of them. Body type is another. And it's a way for an old European art form to kind of make it, keep it insular and keep it to the way they envision beauty. And that's something that I've constantly been trying to break, that pattern and mold. And I've been fortunate that, I've stuck to this and fought and fought and fought. And I've also had people inside of ABT that saw more in me and not just a black body, which a lot of the ballet world sees, and they won't even give you a fair chance, even if you have the talent.
Copeland took her first ballet class at the age of 13, a very late start, but she was quickly hailed as a prodigy. Her childhood was not easy. Copeland and her 5 siblings grew up poor. Her single mother worked multiple jobs as the family often lived in motels like this in Gardena, California.
It was not typical, especially of someone in the ballet world. It takes a lot of money to be a part of it, and usually coming from a certain stature of family and community to even just kind of break into it or even know what it is. And I didn't have any of that. My mom was a single parent with 6 children, and we were constantly moving. There was no real stability. I was in a lot of different schools. And by the time I was 11, we had been in and out of motels, just really surviving. My mom just trying to keep all of us kids in school and out of trouble and with food on the table. And by the time ballet discovered me at my Boys and Girls Club, the community center in Los Angeles, we were really at the lowest point. So we were in Gardena, California, and it was in the middle of this insanely busy street. Was not at all where people lived and where homes were, and we were all in one room. So all of us kids would just sleep on the floor with either a sleeping bag or a blanket, and that was normal for us and for me. Though I had a lot of shame and no one knew about my personal life. But when I was home, it was just like, this is what home is. They're never really, we didn't really ever have a home. And so I feel like the way I view what home is to me and how proud I am of what I've built with my husband, it's really about having love and having consistency and having stability. And that's how I view my home and why I cherish it so much.
You came late to the game, 13. That's quite late. What, kids start at 3 or 4. Was there any other sport earlier that?
Oh, I grew up in a very sports-driven home. My mother was a professional cheerleader for the Kansas City Chiefs
Oh,
football
wow.
team. She really only became a cheerleader because she wanted to be able to see the games. So I grew up in that type of atmosphere. All of my siblings played sports. Basketball was a huge part of my household as well. But I had no interest in any of it. I was so introverted as a child, and I know a lot of it had to do with my surroundings, and I was just constantly in like protection mode and in survival mode, and I was not open enough to be able to take anything in. I was just like this ball of anxiety all the time, and it wasn't until music was always a part of my household, but music was the one thing that I felt gave me a sense of calm, and allowed me to be able to think about expression in a way that just wasn't verbal. And so that's when I started to move my body. Even before I went into ballet, I was choreographing in any little corner I could find of any house that we lived in. But 13 is an extremely late age to start. My training was like on hyper speed. I ended up living with my ballet teacher and her husband and her 3-year-old son, to make up for lost time. And I lived with them for 3 years. I ended up only training for 4 years before I moved to New York City and joined American Ballet Theater, which is very rare.
Was it a goal to become the first Black principal dancer of the American Ballet Theater, or you just, like every at bat, you made it a quality at bat and that's how you moved along?
Everyone's goal when they join a company is to become a principal dancer or a star. And so the color of my skin was not even something I was thinking of. I didn't really understand my purpose, and I didn't understand how rare it was for a Black girl or a Black young woman to be in a company of the caliber of American Ballet Theater. The first decade of my career, I was the only Black woman in the company, a company of 90 dancers. The longer I was in the company, and I realized that I wasn't being given, opportunities to do the classical works, because most dancers of color are often just given the more contemporary modern works. And so those dreams started to kind of dwindle away. And I think it was after meeting one of my mentors, Raven Wilkinson, who was one of the first Black ballerinas to dance in a major company in the United States, in the 1950s, and meeting her and realizing how much it meant for me, like it was bigger than me to be in this position at American Ballet Theater as a Black woman. And that's when my goals kind of shifted. And I was like, I want to be the first. Because I know what that title will mean for the generations to come and how many doors it can open for other people.
On the way to her 2015 historic promotion to principal dancer, Copeland landed her first ABT leading role in 2012 as the iconic Firebird. But in her debut, she pushed past a serious injury that could have jeopardized her career. Did you feel pressure, oh, I am this trailblazer and I must perform?
Absolutely. As athletes experience, I've probably had all of my injuries have probably been identical to so many football and basketball players, what they experience. But one of the most critical was after that first performance of the Firebird at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City. And I had been dancing on 6 stress fractures to my tibia. And
What?
yeah. And the reason that I pushed through to get through that one performance, if I were any other white dancer that was given that opportunity, I could have pulled out of my shows and I would have been given that opportunity again. But I knew that because I was 29 years old, the reason I got the opportunity was because of an outside choreographer coming in and seeing something in me. And I knew that if I didn't do that show where all the Black community was coming out to support me for the first time, a lot of them at the Met, that I would be missing out on such a huge opportunity. So I pushed through and got through one show after dancing, a couple of seasons on it. But I did it because even if I wasn't going to ever dance on it again, I knew that that night had already shifted the ballet world.
New York City has been Copeland's home since she was 17. And here, at the famed Metropolitan Opera House at Lincoln Center, she's grown accustomed to performing before a sold-out house. While the curtains are closed due to the pandemic, Copeland continues to train, to write, and to speak up on matters of social justice. Now is maybe the best platform that you've had in your career. There's such a movement for social justice, for Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Where does that figure for you?
I feel like I've had the same voice for 20 years of my career. I've gotten a lot of pushback from it. It kind of was not something that, a lot of generations before me would do because of the consequences. But I've been at the forefront of those conversations of racism in ballet, racism in the world, the lack of diversity. I helped to start an initiative, a diversity initiative with ABT maybe 7 or 8 years ago called Project Plie that is now called Rise. But so I've been doing this work. I do think that internally people are hearing me differently, like in terms of the ballet world. A lot of these companies from all over the globe have come to me and are hearing me for the first time. But I don't think that my platform has changed or that I'm saying anything different. I feel like if anything, now the next generation, they feel more willing and comfortable with sharing their experiences because we're in a different time. And if anything, I feel like now is the time for me to pass the baton to the next generation to be able to speak about their experiences.
It's interesting when you say that for 20 years, you've been a prominent African American woman with the same voice, but now it's being heard. And is that comforting to you or encouraging that it is shifting?
It's complicated. It's complicated and it's frustrating, but I think that when you commit to this type of work, that that it's never going to be smooth, it's never going to be exactly what you want or how you envision it, but you go with what little growth there may be, and that's a promise for a brighter future. And so there's just a lot of ups and downs and emotions, and all I can do is just keep pushing along and keep encouraging other dancers of color to use their voices and use their platforms and be honest and open, and that in the end, like, it's only going to help us and help the ballet world progress.
Interesting. am a pioneer of my own business of sportscasting. And I always say when I speak that how many times you can substitute the word prejudice for tradition. It's tradition that blacks didn't go to Harvard. It's tradition that Jews didn't go to Brown. It's tradition that a woman didn't cover the NFL. Tradition black females don't dance. So I think whenever people, I always stiffen up a little bit whenever people say, oh, well, that's the tradition.
That's so powerful. I've never thought about it that way. And that is just so dead on.
What are the structural changes that you would like to see in ballet?
You know, there's been so much shift and which makes me happy that people are actually paying attention to these things. You know, small little details that really have an effect on dancers of color. Something as small as the terms and phrases that are used. We don't call our, our coaches coaches. Their titles are ballet master, ballet mistress, things like that. American Ballet Theater has taken a leap and completely like demolished all of those titles. That to me is a huge step internally, just for how you feel inside being in a studio and having to refer to someone as your master. It's so structured into the ballet world. I think, as well as just the way we look at the hierarchy of these institutions, and is it really necessary? It's one thing to feature a dancer, but there's just this systemic thing where, one person is more or better than the next, just as well as opening every opportunity to more people of color. It's not just about who we see on the stage. It's about the teachers that are teaching this generation that will eventually come up through the company. If they don't have representation and they don't feel comfortable in an atmosphere, they're not going to stick to it. And we're not going to have a pool of dancers of color to choose from in these elite companies. It's the stage managers, it's the board of directors, it's the artistic staff. There's so many layers that, of these institutions that keep them in the same place. And if you don't diversify all aspects of it, then we can't move forward.
One area of your life that you have been so involved is writing, which so many athletes do not, participate in that element of the arts. But tell us about your latest book. It's got that wonderful title.
Bunheads. Bunheads. Bunheads is this kind of eclectic group of little misfit kids that come from all different backgrounds and have different body types and different life experiences, but they find this beautiful commonality in the ballet studio, which is very much a lot of people's experiences. And it's not often depicted in film and television and media. Ballet is often shown with these very aggressive tropes of cutthroat, just everyone just kind of against each other and over-sexualized women. And that's just not been my experience. And so I'm constantly trying to show the beauty in the relationships that you create. And in Bunheads, it's really all about that. It's about supporting one another and seeing the differences in each other and helping come together and reach your goals. And so in this book, the characters are based on actual people in my life. And young Misty is the star of the book. And her best friend, Kat, who is actually one of my best friends growing up, Catalina, who's a Mexican-American girl. I just wanted to be able to show that ballet can look like the world. And it was especially important for me to have a boy character in there. Wolfie, who was my ballet teacher's 3-year-old son that I lived with, but to show that boys can dance and it's okay, and that it's not something that you should be ashamed of. The illustration, Setor Fiagibe, who is the illustrator, is phenomenal. And he actually had never done a children's book and he'd never drawn dancers before. But when I saw his work, he was drawing these kind of comic like superheroes. And I thought, that's exactly how I see dancers, as these superheroes. And so I thought he was the perfect person for it. And what he did was more than I imagined.
Copeland's book Bunheads, which is a term of endearment, is the first in a series she's writing for children. But don't expect Misty Copeland to retire her pointe shoes anytime soon. After 25 years of dancing, she knows there's still room to improve.
It never ends. the work never ends. I think the growth never ends. I wish we were computers and we could have a wonderful performance and save and program and then just blossom from that. But as an athlete would know, like your body is different every morning that you wake up, and you adjust to what it needs. So you never can have that same approach from a technical standpoint of how you're going to do what you need to do. For me, I'm in a place where I'm constantly growing technically and having to assess what I'm doing. But the most beautiful thing is to be able to keep layering on the life experiences and the artistry and the characters that I'm performing in. To me, that's like the most exciting at this point in my career.
You know, time is undefeated. When, for you, will you say, okay, maybe you traded some of the speed or quickness, but now you have wisdom? But what will it be for you that you say, okay?
I'm not going to be done for a while. I think I know when to say no to certain ballets, that I wouldn't be 100% proud of the physicality that I know is necessary to bring to certain roles. Um, but I am definitely at a point where I can see clearly what I want to do and what's best suited for me. And a lot of that is kind of stepping away from the more abstract, just completely physical roles, and the ones that are just really layered in the emotion and in the character. Because to me, it's really special to be in a place where you can bring something new and different to those types of roles. But I've been thinking for the past year about what those next steps are for me in terms of existing in a company. And it's exciting to think about, what's next. And, ballet will forever be a part of everything that I do. And I'll always be involved in helping move it forward. But at some point, you got to step down and give that mantle to the next generation.
Not yet, not for a while. Misty, it's just been a joy and a privilege to spend some time with you. And not just me, but everyone who will watch this will thank you for sharing with us.
I feel the same. Thank you so much for having me.